And it was 6 days ago, on August 18th, 2024, that I finished Small Vices by Robert B. Parker. Probably an unexpected update. Um, First off, I want to apologize about the delay. I have been moving and I had COVID, so my throat has been all clogged up and I've been super busy. I just finished unpacking this morning. I moved in yesterday, and I finished unpacking this morning, so I finally got my laptop all set up so I can record this. I read this book pretty much as an audiobook, like while I was packing, and it's only a 6 hour book. Like, it's a really small book. I was going to read more of Robert B. Parker's books, but we'll get into that more when we get to what's new, like what's next. Um, but let's start off with non spoilers about this book. Interesting book. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect going in. I knew it was like a mystery story, so I was expecting that. But I have never read, well, I guess I have read a book this small, but not a mystery book this small. I read Spear. Spear was a very short book, but Spear was built like a short story. It was very like consecutive. This book is built where it could most definitely be a longer story. It could be a much longer story, but the author cut all transitions between the scenes, or most of the transitions between scenes, so that it was super super fast paced. Like it's kind of crazy in terms of like the pacing of this story. Like some action sequence can happen, and then like he'll be like, "We were safe," and it'll be like chapter 32. The next day, I was getting brunch at some day, and I'd be like, "Whoa!" Like we haven't finished processing the previous scene, and it'll just jump into the next day, like some time skip or like just a complete like different like emotional vibe, I guess. You can go straight from like something serious to something not serious back to back in the middle of a chapter or between chapters. It was kind of like, again, like shockingly fast. And because there weren't much in the way of like transitions between scenes, sometimes you could get a little bit of whiplash from it. So, it was my first time reading a book that had something like that in it. And it also is an older book. I have read some old books on this channel, especially in the way of like classics. But the thing is, like, classics aren't usually like very forward. I'll explain what I mean in a second. But I guess I haven't talked about like Huckleberry Finn or anything on here. Um, so there's definitely some examples, but this book has some slurs in it, and part of it is the how old it is. Though this was published in the 90s, so I wouldn't even rate this as that old. But the author was born in the 1930s, so I guess that makes it qualify as old. Opinions, obviously, but there definitely were some slurs in here, and there were some comments, especially some in the way of misogyny or sexism, that would not fly, I don't think. And I was going back and forth between like kind of hating it, but also being like, it fits the characters. So this is one of the first times on this channel that I've had to like process that in the middle of a book, of being like, well, some of this is just portraying the characters. Some of this probably shouldn't be on the page, and it's figuring out where that line is. It's pretty much a constant endeavor as a reader, because like you can have stuff for like the sake of realism, especially like if you have a grim dark story, some characters are going to be dark and say things that are not good to say. Like that just makes logical sense. um, but if you have the main character like kind of agreeing with those mentalities or whatnot, it's easy for a reader to not like it, is the thing. So there's definitely a give or take there, and you could probably write like whole essays about this. I'm entirely sure. um, I don't know my stance on it. I'm still figuring it out as I read it, But I will say this one, the oops, at least one of the uses of the N-word was entirely unnecessary. One of them, arguments can be made. I don't have a stance on that argument currently because I've only read one of his books, and I'm sure other people have much stronger opinions and evidence to back them up and whatever. But one of them didn't really have a purpose. It didn't need to be said. It didn't serve anything. It was just said for the sake of being said. And I don't personally like that. Let's just say that. So, did not like that about this book, personally. On the other hand, one of the things that Robert B. Parker was actually known for was for his diversity in his books, and I will say I did notice that. Not just in terms of women and men, but in terms of religious backgrounds, race, and color, both race and color, and also queer characters. They were all present in this book, all of them. So I will give a hats off on that because I wouldn't have expected that from a mystery story, let alone a mystery story this old. A lot of mystery stories don't exhibit much in the way of diversity. It's not really the genre to look for diversity, I'll be honest. Sometimes diversity is even not very not great in mystery, especially older mystery, because a lot of the diversity ends up being the bad guys. So I do respect this book for that. One of the main character, the detective, he had to go check out a bunch of charities, and one of the first charities he checked out was the raising money to fight AIDS charity, and he was still himself, but he was also respectful to the person and very genuine. And the person who was working at the place later sent a letter saying you were so nice, people usually aren't, which is realistic to how those societies are treated in the 90s. So that's great. There's definitely some interesting scenes because the main character hits on doesn't hit on women, but will comment on pretty much every woman he runs into and how pretty she is and whatnot, which is something. But there's one point where he's talking to a lesbian and he flat out is they're talking to each other, and she says, I mean, I would like you if I were heterosexual, and he says, a loss for us, a loss for our team. So honestly, that scene actually went well for me. I didn't dislike it. I found it entertaining. So he definitely did some things good in terms of diversity. There's just other things that maybe it's because I'm AFAB, but I just could not listen to some of the sexism or misogyny things. Whether or not it's acknowledged that that's what it is, it certainly feels like it. There's some objectification throughout the story. There's also a bit of weird, very weird monogamy rules things. It's okay to go on. He's dating someone. The main character's dating someone in a relationship with someone. He goes on a date with this other person to get information, which is fine. But she gets really drunk. He walks her home. She kisses him. And he's it would be ungentlemanly to not kiss back. And then it cuts straight from that. It cuts straight from that to him talking to his partner the next morning. And I was I don't know what just happened. I don't know what it's supposed to imply. I don't know if it's there just for the sake of being there, for entertainment, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what that sequence was for. I don't understand it. I'll be very honest. I don't think that really qualifies as monogamy. I don't know. So, overall take of this book, I did like that I read it. I'll explain why in a bit. But I definitely could go back and forth on a lot of things. There's a lot of things I didn't like. There's some things that I respect. The way the mystery came together, I didn't really see it coming. The author was good at telling you what was the truth at the end, but then having the characters explain why that probably isn't right. Like, it's probably something else. It doesn't make sense that that would happen. And I will say that, like, the like reasoning and like the background characters and like the mob and whatnot, how the main detective interacts with the mob, like I definitely enjoyed a lot of that. I enjoyed Hawk. I think that's his name. Oh no, what's his name? I enjoyed a lot of the side characters. I will say that his relationship with his partner is kind of wild. Like, I wouldn't say it's a bad one. I will say that he handles the relationship really well for a book character. Like, he listens to her. He pretty much, it's not necessarily a healthy relationship. He pretty much caves to her for anything. Like, if she's having a problem or whatnot, he will just be like, I'm giving you space. Like, you do your thing. Which is healthy. Like, that action is healthy. Doing it all the time nonstop, maybe not, because as we saw in this book, it gives her an opportunity to like lie or like to not be sharing things that she does need to share. So him caving is good in that he allows her to have space, but also bad in that they don't communicate in times that they need to communicate. You could probably write like a whole essay about their relationship, I'm sure. That's not necessarily where the problem was. The problem was that this whole story started because she asked him to do this investigation, and then she started having a lot of different weird reactions throughout the investigation, and he just never, we're in his perspective, he just never knew what was going on with her or what she was doing, and her solution to a lot of problems was to drink and then not talk or kind of snap at him. So, again, not a relationship I would read often. Better than others I've read, for sure, in terms of like him giving her space. I kind of wasn't expecting that, but like he was good at that. Just the other communication and the way they like talk to each other and whatnot blew my mind. And oh god, okay, we are getting into this. Okay, this is really what I don't understand. He was pretty fine in the relationship, which was what I didn't expect. She, I don't understand. She was talking about all like her exes, which she's had a lot of. All the characters in this book have had a lot of exes and multiple marriages, which is interesting. She's talking about like the reasons why she picked all her exes throughout this story, and she kept talking about how she was choosing people who like she knew weren't great, or like how she knew that were struggling in some way or whatnot. And she explains later on that this is technically spoilers, I guess, but she explains later on that it's because of like how she grew up. I won't explain why, because spoilers, but she explains later that it's because of how she grew up. That makes sense to me, like in terms of like a character development standpoint. People do that in real life. But she's explaining all this to her current partner, who's a detective. And current partner who's a detective is like, what did you find wrong about me? And she says, there's nothing wrong about you. But then also, in a separate conversation, is like, the only reason I like got with you and married you or got in a serious relationship with you is because you're a hard, dangerous man. And I was like, hold on. That is not a reason to get in a relationship. I'm sorry, but it is not. If you pick your person because they're the most dangerous man you know, first of all, main character, not the most dangerous man in Boston, period. No offense, but like, he's not, she probably would end up with someone else if she was picking the most dangerous man. But also, she's saying this to him in their conversation about like them continuing their relationship, and he treats that as if that's perfectly normal, of like, cool. And like, I'm just saying from an outside perspective in 2023 as a young person, all the conversations where she's explaining like the reasons why she likes him, being that he's like dangerous and whatnot, blows my mind. Like I can't even begin to understand. You can be attracted to dangerous people, like 100%. That's perfectly fine. It's the fact that that's your whole. After dating someone for 8+ years, that is the reason you pick for why you're with them. After being with someone for so long, so many years. And that whole time, they have not talked about their backgrounds, their backstories, or anything. It's only in this book, apparently, based off like how they refer to it, that for the first time in their 8 year, whatever, however long relationship, they talk about her growing up. And it's like, that's just a little wild to me. I think that's just a generational thing, but their relationship, I cannot understand. The majority of their relationship is really him going over to her house, taking care of the dog. They drink together and talk about work and then go to bed. Like, that's the majority of their relationship, if I were to like describe it from every scene we saw on page. It's a little wild to me. So, anyway, I have some interesting thoughts about this book, that's for sure. A lot of interesting thoughts about this book. Still a cool cover. I do like the cover. It's like three little guys. This is not the book I read. This is a different book. I am silly. Let me just load it up on my phone. I read Sudden Mischief, not Small Vices. Oopsie. Sudden Mischief. Late correction mid-video. This is the one with the jester on it. That's the one I read. Also a cool cover, but I did not buy that one. I kind of feel silly for holding this book, but it's the same author, Robert B. Parker. So real quick, before we move on into what's new and what's next, I'm not even going to do a spoiler section because there's not even, there really isn't much to spoil other than like who actually did it, and I don't really have much in the way of comments about that. The reason why I read this book, even though mixed opinions on it, is because this is actually one of the authors that inspired Jim Butcher, the author of the Dresden Files. And I was very curious because I know that he loves this author and kind of aspires to this author in some ways. So I wanted to read like some of his books. I promised myself I'd read at least 3. And since I own Small Vices and The Professional, I figured those are the ones I'm going to read. And I do like that I read this. It does give me some perspective to Jim Butcher. I will say that Robert B. Parker has more diversity than Jim Butcher does currently. Jim Butcher is great at showing diversity in like beliefs and religion. Like he's got that covered, but in terms of like race, there's not the most diversity in the world in the Dresden Files. There's really not. There really should be more, especially for Chicago. Chicago definitely has some diversity, more than is being portrayed in the novels. So, like, a lot of, like, the White Council has some diversity in terms of, like, the background characters, but again, like, the main characters, I can name several, like, there's several Hispanic characters, but, like, other than that, Hispanic or Mexican, and it's never even, like, really explained, like, where they're from either. Like, it's never, like, specific, like, what region in South America, Central America, or Spain. It's always just like generally Hispanic or Latin. I don't think he's even said like Latin, Latino, or Latina, or Latinx. Yeah, I'm currently only thinking of two main side characters that are people of color, that are like really dark skinned. I can only think of really one, and then one that's on the page like in 4 different books for a few pages. Like it's really, really not prevalent. So I think there are things Jim Butcher could do better. I can also see how Jim Butcher processes how Harry looks at women. This story explained that a lot. Jim Butcher is better at that in terms of like it not feeling as drastically like sexism and misogyny, but I will say that Harry, especially in the early books, does say some things about women that aren't great. And I've actually known a lot of people who read the Dresden Files to quit in the first few books. A lot of women to quit in the first few books for that reason. And I now see why Jim started writing that way and why it made sense to him. And the thing is, like, mystery as a genre definitely did that a lot. A lot. That was just one of the stereotypes of a detective. So, again, this gave me some more context to that. And so it's nice to have the context for why one of the authors I read writes the way that they do. It probably won't continue aging well, but it also means that he has a consistent older audience, which he does. He has probably a male-dominant older audience. So some of this comes down to who is your audience as an author. So anyway, that's the reason why I read this book, was to get some context for the Dresden Files, which I still love as a series. Like, I really do. I have some issues with it, don't get me wrong. I will consistently have issues with Dresden Files, but I'm still going to keep reading it unless a certain thing happens in the next book, and then I probably will officially drop the series, because if that happens, then that's a line I will not cross. But there's a lot of other issues with the book. Usually I just recommend the series and flat out tell people what the problems are, and so they can judge if they want to read the series or not. Yeah. What's new and what's next? So, you may be wondering, what is the status on Rhythm of War? Well, I am not reading it on purpose. The 5th book of Stormlight Archive comes out this December, and I have a feeling that I'll get through at least part of this book very quickly. So I didn't want to finish this book and then wait several months for the 5th book of Stormlight. Also, even when it comes out, I'm going to be getting it through my library, and so I'm going to be waitlisting. Probably the day of, I'm going to be spamming the put me on hold button. And we'll see. I might end up on like a 3-month waitlist, and so I don't want to read this book and then have to wait another 3 months. So I'm trying to figure out when that book comes out and when I can have access to that book so I can finish this book. That's the current plan. So we're reading other books in the meantime, which is probably good and bad. I don't think I'm gonna forget much in the way of Oathbringer because it was such a memorable book, which is great. I may get out of the habit of reading this series, but also I'm still kind of excited to read this series, so I'm really not that worried currently. It gives me time to address other series or other books that I've not read that I've been meaning to read for a long time. So, you may wonder what some of those books are. One of them, which is a new book I believe, that I've bought since I've seen y'all, is Legends and Lattes. I've wanted to read this book for a while. It's been highly recommended by a lot of my friends, and it looks like a book I would love. I'll be honest, I don't read much in the way of, like, I guess you could say romance. I don't read much in the way of that. This is one I would read. period. I've not even read it yet, and I know I will love it. So I will be reading it. I'm very excited to. It's very large text. It's a small book. It's like, I think it's like 7 hours. 1 hour longer than the book I just read. So I will probably be reading this the next few weeks for sure. My friends have wanted me to read it for so long. The cover is so good. It's so good. I love it so much. I love D&D. If you don't know, I do love D&D, and this is like a D&D meets coffee shop book. What can go wrong? I'm just saying. So that's probably next on the list. I am on hold for Master of Jin audiobook. I can try reading it in person. I've not been able to read my physical books because I've had so few physical books with me. Speaking of, my bookshelf will be back next week, so I'll be looking at physical books again, which is very exciting. So, Master of Jin is on the list of books I may read. Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb is on the list of books I may read. That's a trilogy. I mean, it's a trilogy that's part of a longer series. I think I can read Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. Maybe. So that's in the cards because I've been meaning to read that for a long time, and I'm really lacking in female authors. And so that's why Robin Hobb has been high on my list. I want to read another female author. I was going to read Good Omens or American Gods. My friends have some opinions on that recently for various reasons I'm not going to get into on here, so I may postpone that. I could read my Robert B. Parker books because they're both super small. Small Vices, super small book. The text isn't even that small. Or The Professional. I know that book is super, super small. So I could read those just to get them out of the way and also catch up on my reading goals for this year because I'm behind. Not sure. There's a lot of different possibilities. I think I'm also on hold for Can't Spell Treason Without T. I think that's the name of the book. Let me look. Can't Spell Treason Without T. I'm also waitlisted for Black Tongue Thief, which I have the ebook for. I'm not gonna lie, I've not read anything on my Kindle, really, like, ever. I don't know, there's just something about the fact that I have to carry my Kindle with me everywhere that I don't use it. I really should get in the habit of using it. I own Black Tongue Thief on my Kindle, so that's the disparity right now. But I actually accidentally convinced my summer roommate to read that book, and he got to like chapter 10, and it sounded cool, but he started liking it, so because of that, I've been looking at that book myself. That book's like 13 hours long in terms of the audiobook, so also not like terribly long. And that's it. I've been rereading the Dresden Files, because I have this project I've been doing since 2020 for the series where I keep rereading it for that project. So I've been doing that. I'm rereading Changes, and then I'm probably going to reread either Cold Days or Stormfront. Very different books. The first book and the 14th book. But again, it's for a project. So rereading will probably, delay some things a little bit. But yeah, I currently have Assassin's Apprentice audiobook. It is 17 hours long. A lot of things depend when it comes to audiobooks, especially since school's about to start. I'm going to be listening to audiobooks on like the bus to go to class and back from class. A lot of things that matter about audiobooks is the narrator and their voice. I started a book the other day that I was excited to start, but I just couldn't do the narrator. I couldn't listen to him explain it or like narrate, and so I had to give up the book. I think that actually happened twice. One of them was a new book, which I forgot what it was. The second one was a reread. I was trying to listen to the first book of Powder Mage, and I just didn't like the narrator's voice. And so I gave up. So that's the thing with audiobooks for me. I am like slightly picky, I'm not gonna lie. Which is why I usually prefer physical books, but all my physical books aren't here. I only have like 13 or so here, and most of them are, you know, my Sando books. So, yeah, we'll figure it out. I don't think I own any new books that y'all haven't seen. I don't think. Depends how long how long it's been since I made a video. Like, I bought Noir. I think I remember showing y'all Noir. So, yeah, I don't think I brought any other new books other than Legends and Lattes, which I'm excited to read. So, this may be the next book. It may not. I'm not. It may not be. I'm not quite sure. We will see soon. Also, it says new bonus prequel story. Unless that means the second book. I forgot the name of the second book. Intriguing. No, it is a little prequel story at the end. It may be this book. We'll see. Anyway, I will do my best to continue reading, and hopefully I will see you all soon when I finish probably a short book, maybe even Farseer, the first book of Farseer. That is more of a commitment, but I think it's doable. I know that those are heavy books, so I think it won't be much in the way of a break from Stormlight Archive, but it may honestly like keep me in touch for Stormlight Archive. We'll see. Anyway, see you all soon. Bye bye.